fix it. So your second analytical essay is based on 3 of the poems from the poetry packet, Female, Queer, and Black Perspectives in Poetry. You may analyze the theme, tone, symbolism, style, or critical interpretations of the poems. You can choose one long poem to discuss, or you can discuss 3 different poems. No, again, there are no long poems. Okay, I think we're good now. You may analyze the theme, tone, symbolism, style, or critical interpretations of the poems. You can choose any 3 poems. 3 poems, analyzing a different element from each. Only one poem can the theme be analyzed, and only one poem can the style be analyzed, and only one poem can the symbolism be, a specific symbol be discussed, or a critical interpretation, okay? Your essay must have these components: an introduction, body, conclusion, thesis statement, good development, topic sentences, and transition words. Your paper must be double-spaced, 3 to 4 full pages, about 1,200 words. It needs to be 1,200 words or more, okay? And then you're gonna need to have 3 outside sources. Okay. So what I'm gonna do now is we're gonna pull up the document that has the poems in it. And I'm going to analyze 3 different poems with 3 different points to make about them. So this packet right here, Female, Queer, and Black Perspectives in Poetry, which I already have open, really. Let me change my new share. Okay, so I'm picking 3 poems to discuss theme, symbolism, and either critical interpretation, like feminism. So here are critical interpretations. Okay, we can do a critical race theory interpretation. Meaning, okay, how does this poem reflect the struggles of Black people? Okay. Feminism. Okay, feminism. Critical interpretation, feminism, as in, what would be what is a feminist reading of this poem? And you would do some like outside research on the different feminist perspectives, because there's like third wave feminism, there's modern feminism, there's different types of feminist perspectives that people hold. So you would do some research on what feminism is and discuss how the poem relates to a certain specific feminist perspective. Another critical interpretation, we can do a carry on from the first paper, an existentialist interpretation. Okay, you could do what's called queer theory on a few of them. Research that. So this requires some outside research if you decide to do a critical interpretation of one of the poems, which would be great to do. Hey, how dark this is. Sorry, I turned this light on and do this backdrop, so maybe this would lighten this up a little bit, but it did not. All right, so I'm gonna pick one poem from each of the different perspectives, okay? Let's see. All right, I want to pick A Woman Speaks by Audre Lorde for my feminist perspective, okay? Okay, so if I'm going to read this, I'm going to talk about symbolism. So let's read the poem first. A Woman Speaks by Audre Lorde. Moon marked and touched by sun, my magic is unwritten. But when the sea turns back, it will leave my shape behind. I see no favor untouched by blood, unrelenting as the curse of love, permanent as my errors, all my pride. I do not mix love with pity, nor hate with scorn. And if you would know me, look into the entrails of Uranus, where the restless oceans pound. I do not dwell within my birth, nor my divinities, who am ageless and half grown, and still seeking my sisters, witches, and Dahomey, where my inside their coiled cloths as our mother did mourning. I have been woman for a long time. Beware my smile. I am treacherous with old magic and the noon's new fury. With all your wide futures promised, I am woman and not white. Okay. Just for the sake of this, so we can see it all on page, I'm going to delete that. Okay, so I'm going to analyze this poem based on symbolism. Okay? And more specifically, feminist symbolism. Okay? So, things that I know are that have feminist symbolism. Moon. The sea. My shape. Blood. Errors. Curse of love. Uranus and the restless oceans. My sister witches. My smile, I am treacherous. Old magic. All right. Okay. So these are symbols that I would kind of talk about in general for this poem. There's feminist symbolism, okay? And that like so moon and the sea. All right, these are both feminist imagery of that represent of deep emotions. Okay. The moon is sort of represents the dark side of emotions. Okay. It is associated with menstruation and the moon's cycles. Okay. And it is the sun is a masculine symbol. All right. The sun is this blazing, burning fire. And the moon is the opposite of that. Now, the same thing with the sea, the ocean. Sea is always, which we kind of discussed with the sea change. The sea is a female, is personified as female as well. Okay, it's deep. I mean, it's deep and ultimately unknowing. That's what I think men across ages have always said. You know, they just don't really understand. They don't really understand women. Okay, deep, it's unknowing. Okay, it provides all sorts of things. This idea that like it birthed, the lands came from it. It birthed out. Okay, provides. It's always change. It's always in a state of change. You know, they always say that like women's bodies are always in a state of influx. Always. Men are not, but as women as they grow. And I mean, whether it's younger or through puberty and then beyond that with monthly cycle, there's always a state of change that's happening consistently. And so yeah, so you can do more. If you are interested in writing about this poem, you can write about this poem. You can't write about all the 3 poems that I go over in this lecture, okay? But you can go over a few of them. So you can take these discussions and go further with it. Blood, again, blood is a symbol for women. It's I mean, that's, you know, one's obvious, period. Then there's birth, all the blood that comes associated with birth, okay? And throughout literature, throughout the course of literary history, there's a lot of allusions to blood and women and the idea of life and all those kind of things. The curse of love and errors. This is a curse of love, errors. This is a Eve allusion. An allusion, you know, is a reference to a previous piece of art or person or history. And so this is as in like Adam and Eve, okay? She was cursed to serve man. I mean, she was made to be man's companion, if you believe in the mythology of Genesis. And so she was, some say, the root of why women ultimately will love a man even if he's bad to her comes all the way from Eve, this idea that like woman was made from the wound of man. And so she's like almost like emotionally enslaved to him, okay? And that then she committed this error by feeding him the fruit, the forbidden fruit, and how that action has forever stained and cursed woman in general. And so, you know, some say that like women were the world's first slave. So curse of love, errors, Eve illusion. This is definitely, you know, a negative interpretation. And by negative, I mean like as in some people have this what's called a complementary perspective of female creation in Judaism and Christianity, that like it's very positive. Like women were created to balance out men, and women were there to complement men, as in to complete men. And the very Jerry Maguire, you complete me, and that like man will be lost without woman, and she's the great soother, and she helps balance him, and you know it's all like very like positive, okay? And then a negative interpretation, of more pessimistic, would be this idea that like women were born in bondage to men, if you believe in that mythology of Christianity and Judeo-Christian, and that like they were born almost like a genie to the person who had to the man. The man has his lamp, he rubs it, genie comes out, genie is there just to grant all the wishes and to serve and to belong to that man who holds the genie's home, okay? And that is a way of looking at this, that women were cursed by having emotions, by having love and dedication, and doing all these things for their man, which ultimately kind of ends up with further cursing them through their errors, like feeding your man the forbidden fruit, okay? Okay, so kind of a negative interpretation of the creation story of women and the quote forbidden fruit. Okay, again, Uranus is a planet of oceans, which we already said, O equals women, all right, and their emotions, okay, is restless. I mean, restless oceans, then that's very much like Janine was restless in her marriage with Marcel. All right, my smile, I'm treacherous, another biblical allusion to the idea of a who's that lady? Of a Delilah. A Delilah is an archetypal character now of a woman who deceives a man. Old magic goes to this idea of witches, and and my sister's witches, and Dahomey, which this is actual thing. You can look this up. You can look this up. This is another allusion to the group of women in Africa. But women have always been associated with witchcraft because men, this idea that men become enchanted with them, and these women put a spell on them to manipulate them to get them to do the things that the women want them to do. So like witches are far more common to be associated with in today's society than like wizards, okay, which is a male equivalent to a witch, but no one's like, oh, he's a wizard. No, but there is still a strong association of witchcraft and women who have these powers over men. Okay, so symbolism is really good for this poem. I'm running out of time. Let's see. So then if we were to do Alone by Edgar Allan Poe. Okay. We could do this theme. Or no, actually, this will probably be better. A queer theory analysis. Okay. Edgar Allan Poe here talks about how he was born, the speaker of this poem, whether it's Poe's autobiographical or not, okay, the speaker talks about even from childhood, okay, they're born, they always knew that they were different. All right, I've not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source, I've not taken my sorrow. I cannot awaken my heart to joy at the same tone. And all I loved alone. Then in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life, was drawn from every depth of good and ill, the mystery which binds me still. From the torrent or the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled in its autumn tints of gold, from the lightning in the sky as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm and the cloud that took the form, when the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon in my view. Okay, so to this poem very much is similar. Okay, this is connected, all right, to the sea change. This same sort of idea that like this speaker was born a certain way, born totally different than children. Okay, and so if you study queer theory, a lot of it discusses how that people are born gay, they don't choose this, and that if you look at like a history of literature, you can see authors and characters struggling with their internalized, repressed homosexuality and their own inner homophobia, fear of themselves, of their own gayness, and then having to deal with that in a society that is not permissible. Okay, so here he somehow the source he loves things that other people don't love, and he feels alone. He realizes that he's different. He understands that he does not fit in with these other kids, and this has been terrible for him. And that that his religion teaches him that maybe the way he's feeling is of a demonic perspective, which is kind of like with the sea change and the Alexander Pope quote about vice is a monster, and this idea that like society teaches people that being gay is bad, even though nature tells us that people are born gay. And that causes a lot of terrible repression. I mean, the person who shot up the gay nightclub in Miami, he had journal entries admitting that he was gay and that are talking about his homosexual feelings. And I think he might have come out or tried to with somebody else, and it did not go well. So he had all this repressed anger and rage towards himself, and then he took it out on what should have been his own community. Okay. And so you could do a queer theory analysis of this poem alone by Edgar Allan Poe and research queer theory in literature, and then apply what you find to this poem. Okay, so we have symbolism, we have theme, critical analysis. Okay, sorry. And then we can either do style or theme. And in terms of style, I think this poem, The Year My Grandfather Was Born by Clint Smith. The year my grandfather was born, a gallon of gas was 20 cents and a loaf of bread was 9. Slavery had ended 6 years ago, and 12 years later, everyone would forget. The year my grandfather was born, which, by the way, Clint Smith is my age, okay? The year my grandfather was born, he had 8 siblings and 2 parents, and a grandfather born into bondage he tried to bury. The year my grandfather was born, millions of Americans were unemployed. And over 1,000 banks were shut down. The Great Depression had taken a deep breath, and the U.S. didn't exhale for 2 years. The year my grandfather was born, 21 people were lynched, and no one heard a sound. The trees died, and the soil turned over, and the leaves baptized all that was left behind. The year grandfather was born. I think that's where probably supposed to be I typed this from a book. There were full trains leaving Mississippi and only empty ones coming back. So for style, this could be style or theme. And we have this repeated phrase, okay, over the year my grandfather was born. And so, you know, the style and the theme can work together. All right, of the year my grandfather was born. And, you know, it's this idea of perspective. Okay. All this racial injustices, inequality, turmoil was not that long ago. Okay. And sometimes we think that way. Sometimes we feel like things were back in the olden times, when in fact they weren't that long ago. I mean, the year my grandfather was born, his grandfather was born into bondage. Okay, so the speaker's grandfather, his grandfather's grandfather was born a slave. And so, you know, the idea that like when you were born, when the speaker was born and he was held by his grandfather, his grandfather was held by somebody who could have been a slave at one time. That shows how close we were from that time. And to remind, you know, people that like the fight for equality and perseverance and justice is a fight that is still necessary, because we're not that far from these atrocities, and especially in the long span of human existence. Okay, so this would be a good poem to talk about for style and theme together or separated. Oh, you can come in. It's okay.
I'll be back.
Okay. And one thing you can harp on is the idea of the year my grandfather was born, and how it's trying to get people to have some perspective of these issues that might seem outdated, but really are not. Okay. So that's this lecture. I went over 3 poems, 3 ways in which you can go over them. All this has to deal with the fact that your second paper is on poetry, and that you will be